Converse. We're going to be having a conversation this afternoon with our guests, brother and sister Henry and Nina, brother and sister Patrick and Nina Henry. We're going to be discussing today conflicts in relationships, conflicts in general, actually, and how we can overcome them. And Nina and Patrick is going to help us in this discussion. So would you come on at this time, Nina and Patrick, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Nina, obviously. I guess I can start with giving a quick synopsis of our relationship. My name is Nina. Patrick and I met, maybe almost 30 years ago in Winnipeg. We started dating, and then about 26 years ago, we got married. And we moved to Ontario about a year later, and we have 2 children, and I'm just trying to think of anything else. I think that's about it. We've been living in this area, going to Emmanuel Church for that whole time. And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Patrick, and good afternoon to everyone. I grew up in Toronto area, in fact, in the Emmanuel pre-Maranatha Church. My parents were members. So I've known many of you for a lot of years, practically all of my life. I had the privilege to attend university school in Western Canada and have my first job career in Winnipeg, which is where I met Nina.
Right.
And following some time in Winnipeg, we relocated to Ontario here, to Thornhill. And that's when I was reconnected with the Emmanuel Church. As mentioned, we have 2 lovely children, many of you know, Madeline and Nathan. They've practically grown up in this church, this house, this church, this neighborhood. So we tend to stay with what's familiar. And just we actually enjoy sharing our home with our friends, family, and our children, and many of our children's friends. We have an open invitation. So I personally am very active in sport. I golf a lot, I play hockey, and I do fitness. And that's really what I do to pass any free time that I have. You can always find me doing something active.
Yeah.
And back to you, host.
Okay.
And I'm Joan Rogers, and this is my husband, David Rogers, and we are the hosts today for the Couples Converse at Emmanuel Church. At this time, we're going to have a special musical selection. It's called Magnificent, and it is going to be played for you by our IT person in the background, Victoria. Please enjoy, and we will reconnect and have our guests again after the song.
Who compares to you? You who sets the stars in their place. You who calms the raging sea.
Welcome back, everyone, to Youth Couples Converse, where our guests are Patrick and Nina Henry, individuals that you may have known for quite some time, but yet they have a fresh outlook on life. We're going to be dealing with a subject that all of us deal with from time to time, and that is conflict. And they've got the keys to help us to unlock and to overcome conflict. Nina, what is your definition of conflict, and what are some sources when it comes to conflict?
The definition of conflict would be a strong disagreement or argument between parties, or to be incompatible with somebody, or at variance, to clash. And all conflict would fall into two categories: internal and external. Internal conflict would be when a person struggles with their own opposing beliefs or desires. It happens within them, and it drives their character and their moral development. There's also an internal conflict when your actions don't match your internal beliefs, and that can cause psychological distress. And for external conflict, that's when a person is set against something that's external, whether it's a person, principalities, something outside of or some sort of force that's outside of their own control. And that would be an external conflict.
So we have two sources, internal and external. Okay, excellent.
And Patrick, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so these sources actually can come into us in several ways. One, it could be a task. Often activities we either do in the home, could be in a workplace or in our community, can bring around conflicts or differences based on goals or even approaches. We often find conflicts in relationships. It could be individuals with other individuals, or could even be between groups. And finally, often our processes can bring about conflicts. So that could even be a workplace event, or just a disagreement between an employee, an employer, a colleague. Again, usually processes can just conflict because they're poor processes, and the different ideas just do not come together well.
But it's so natural in that we're all different, aren't we? And we think differently. And as you rightly said, we process things differently. And sometimes when we make suggestions, whether it be good or bad, it can actually lead to conflict.
And also, we come from different places in life. Either our environment is different, the country might be different, our parenting is different, or even where they're from in terms of where they were born or raised. And so they might teach us a way to do a process. And then I meet somebody from another country who have learned it differently. And if we don't agree to disagree, or if we don't agree to allow each other to do what we know, or trust each other to know that the outcome might be what the outcome might be, then, that is going to cause some conflict. So it brings me to the next question. What is the definition of outcome, Nina?
The outcome or overcoming is to succeed in dealing with any problems that you're faced with. So you can defeat an opponent or an external challenge, or you can prevail against any sort of inner struggles that you may have. And I think, especially one of the most important things, I think, would be prevailing against inner struggles that you have, because that's the one thing that, hopefully you can have some control over. Right. With, of course, the grace of God.
Yes. So the main thing that we're looking at today is how we could overcome these conflicts, because they are here and they're always going to be here because we're different individuals. So how do we overcome it?
And if they don't come to you, you probably go to them, because we live with individuals and we think differently, and everybody reacts differently to various situations. Okay. And so, what are some common causes of conflict, Patrick?
Yeah, so conflict will often come out of a few different categories. One can be out of information. We often can either lack information, we could have the wrong information. We may look at information as data and facts and disagree about how we interpret that information. Often we can have conflict through different values, and our values, who it's part of our character and our makeup, often can be shared, but there could be issues or elements of that that are not commonly shared, and that can also be a source of conflict. We sometimes have conflicts of interest, just two different areas that we want to go to, or we are interested in one thing and our party is interested in something else. And we can find ourselves conflicted there. Of course, relationships are the place that we often see conflict, whether it's an individual again, or even as a group. We often can see different dynamics in relationships, such as power differences that bring about conflict. And we often have to figure out how to resolve these imbalances or these conflicts so that the relationship can continue to thrive.
Mhm. We would think that, as Christians, we wouldn't have anything like power conflict, would we? But Nina, do you have anything else to add to this about conflicts, the common causes of conflict?
Pardon me?
Do you have anything to add to what Patrick said about the causes of conflict?
Right. Yes, so we can add to some of the common causes of family conflicts are dealing with when members of a family have different beliefs, viewpoints, or conflicting personalities. And as you said, also things like culture. Conflict can arise when people misunderstand one another. And I think usually if people do misunderstand one another, conflict will arise after that. Or when someone's hurt by the actions or words of another, when a family member or members feel invalidated by another. And I think that's a big one, because often validation is such, feeling validated, even if the person doesn't agree, is such an important part of good interpersonal communication. Miscommunication can also lead to mistaken assumptions and subsequent arguments. People can jump to conclusions about another person's intent, which can lead to mistaken assumptions about their character. And it can lead to mistaken assumptions about their character, about their morals, about their value. So an example I would use would be, if this would be outside of the family home, but if you're driving down the street and if someone cuts you off, people can sometimes jump to a mistaken conclusion about the intent of that person, like, oh, they're selfish, or they're rude, or they're disrespectful, rather than saying, oh, maybe they just didn't see me, or they were in a hurry, or something like that. Or, there was an accident at home and they're rushing to get home. Things like that. We often can sometimes jump to the wrong conclusions and a very negative conclusion about somebody's intents. And all this can lead to resentment, bitterness, anger, and withdrawal. And people often can handle more of a gulf between each other, or gulf in goals, if they feel validated and cared for.
Okay.
Wow.
Isn't it something that differences attracts us to begin with? I'm sure when Patrick met you, he probably said, oh, she's so different from anybody else that I know.
They are different.
And then once we get together in relationships or in groups and stuff, we want everybody to become like us. We don't want to appreciate the personalities anymore. And yet that's what attracts us in the first place. So
yeah,
conflict is always around, because there are differences in people, and we just need to learn to navigate them well, live with them, and respect each other. From what you're just told us, that's really very good. Do you have anything for them there?
Are we looking at another question?
Yes.
Oh, I thought they dealt with some of the common causes of family conflict.
Oh, sorry, I did mean to add that certain stages within families can also cause conflict.
Okay.
As you mentioned, learning to live as a new couple, the difference is that we're, so attractive when you were dating might not be so attractive once you're married.
Do you have any stories about that? You want to
Well, we've got lots, I'm sure. Patrick, why don't you bring up some of them? Well, actually, the difference, like me being late, that's not something that you were attracted to from the beginning, but
Okay, you brought it up, so
Yes,
I
I
can
did.
talk about it. Yeah, so we all have our own personalities. We have habits and things that provide conflict and provide annoyances to each other. There are lots of different ways to work with the solutions. One of the things that we have, come to, I guess, employ for ourselves is that if there are situations that are constant, such as one party being late and the other wanting to be on time, we have accommodated each other by going separately. And so we have two vehicles, which we had to have, and the one that needs to be on time can be on time, and the one that necessarily can't help but be late is late. And that's just how we work. And so we don't need to pressure each other to be early or have the other person wait and feel uncomfortable that their time is being wasted.
Yeah.
That's just how we have chosen to accommodate
Yeah.
a particular conflict for our family.
Yeah. We can definitely
We can identify with that.
resonate with that. In early life, it was really a struggle with having the young children and him having to be at church at a certain time earlier than everybody else, because he didn't want to be on time. He wanted to be an hour before anybody else arrives at church. He wanted to just acclimatize himself to the emptiness and walk around the church, make sure everything was in place. And he did that for years and years. He's just like that. He has to be there before everybody and relax and be ready for the service. So, I had young ones and I had to be putting them. Yeah, we had young ones, but I had to make sure they're dressed and they eat and stuff like that. So we did something like that, and it has helped because my anxiety levels have gone down because of the rush and not feeling like I'm dressed appropriately because I'm the one who always get left behind because I'm looking after the children and all of that. So yeah, that's our story. That's our story, and I'm going to stick to that story, right? Okay.
I remember.
I was going to add something else, if you don't mind. I was just going to say, learning to live together as a new couple, there was also things like birth of a baby, birth of other children, child going to school, the child becoming a young person, and a child becoming an adult would also be kind of added to those kinds of pressures that you get in a family relationship. And we've definitely had conflicts over that. One that we were just talking about today was just the idea of when do you give technology to your children? And I wanted to wait much longer than Patrick. Patrick was sort of like, everybody's, all the kids will have it. Our children will be feeling left out if they don't have the phone. And so he was definitely for giving it to them a lot earlier than I wanted to.
Yeah.
So how we ended up dealing with it was they got the phone early. I accommodated.
That was the compromise?
Yeah.
No, that wouldn't be a compromise, because the compromise would be sort of half and half, maybe a little later. So there wasn't, I don't think there was really a compromise.
There was accommodation with rules.
Okay. So that's what I was going to
Not
ask.
enough rules in my mind. It's just easier not to have it than
That is true. That is true.
So those are some suggestions in dealing with conflict. I'm sure you had some, like when you just got married, about space, like you have makeup, you have more stuff than he does. Did you have any kind of accommodation?
Yeah, not in that way, not like in a makeup per se kind of thing, but I'm a pack rat. So
Okay.
I got stuff, like in the basement, that kind of stuff. Yes. So that
Okay.
I would definitely say yes. And so in this case, the resolution was I still got my stuff in the basement.
Okay. So do you have any suggestions in dealing with family conflicts?
What we should try to stay calm.
Mhm.
Can be difficult at times. Try to put emotions aside. Not interrupting when other people are speaking, and that's definitely a habit of mine. I'm a big interrupter. Actively listen to what people are saying and what they mean, not just to what they say, but actually what they mean. And you can check that you understand them by asking them questions so that you're getting a good grasp of their point of view. You can repeat and summarize their points, which show that you have heard and you are validating that they are a person with the right to their own opinion and that they have value as well. And then you can communicate your side of the story clearly and honestly.
Good.
Ah.
Well, just to have a little interjection here, I remember when we first got married, we were in an evangelistic series, and I got married. They gave me 2 days off. And I remember coming home, and my wife had made up the bed with pleats in it. Oh, it looked so pretty. And I sat on the bed to take off my shoes because we rented a room, And she looked at me like, "What are you doing? That's the unpardonable sin. Do you know how long it took me to make up that bed?" And she looked at me and I looked at her and I said, "No, we gotta come to an agreement somewhere." You know what I mean? Because I don't want my brand new wife to be getting off on me. And she said, "Okay, I won't make up the bed so pretty. And you can change your shoes." Just something so simple.
But that was something that we did in college, the girls' dorm was always like that. But so I just continued to do it.
But don't you notice that it's a simple thing sometimes that can lead to some big disagreements?
Yeah. Conflict exists everywhere. Obviously, as has probably being discussed, there's lots of conflict in the church.
Yeah.
It's made up of a very diverse group of people. People come together. Oftentimes, they don't fully appreciate the mission and goals of the church, and so they have their ideas, and we try to come together as a group. And I think oftentimes when conflict really sort of overtakes, there's always issues of pride. Often there could be just spiritual immaturity and personal immaturity in terms of understanding how to deal with differences. Of course, change is never easy for anybody, and change and inflexibility within groups can also bring conflicts. And because a church has such a wide range of diversity, you have it between old and young, you can have it between different cultures, you can have it even between one sex or the other sex. So the church really is a place where it has to learn to deal with conflict for us to be a one church. So anyways, the other environment obviously is work, which we may not talk that much about today, but lots of people see conflicts in their work environment.
Yeah.
And again, I always feel it's first of all be sure you're at a place where you share some common values. If you're in an environment where your value system is very different, you're going to see lots of things that bring conflict on a level. And then certainly between work colleagues or individuals, there are always situations that can bring conflict. And a lot of the resolutions or the methods of resolving these are similar to what you would use in other environments.
It's amazing because sometimes when we are seeking jobs and employment, we don't even look at the organization that we can find easily on the website and look at their core values. And if we don't know the core value of the organization, then we sometimes as Christian find ourselves, or even non-Christian, that there are values there in that organization that's going to give us a multitude of conflicts in our life, because the aim of the organization, their vision and their mission is completely different from your personal vision and mission, in life. So it's always good to make sure that it is, and that, that the authority, the lines of authority is clear. You might be in an organization where you think you go to a supervisor on the right for certain things, but it might be joint responsibilities with another supervisor on the left, or who you go to for what, because that can cause conflicts too, So thank you so very much. What about personality conflicts? We touched on that a little bit before, where personalities can cause conflicts. Did you want to say anything about that, Nina? No?
Pardon me?
Did you want to see anything about personality conflict?
Sure, I could touch on personality conflicts. Personality conflicts arise when two people have very sort of incompatible behaviors in how they express themselves, sort of like an extrovert and an introvert. And so there can definitely be some issues in that kind of situation. The extrovert gains energy from going out and hanging out with a lot of people, where an introvert gets recharged through, hunkering down and staying at home. And actually we have that sort of a little bit of that dynamic. Patrick is much more extroverted than I am. I'm more of an introvert. And so there is, he's more interested in going out, socializing, and I'm like, oh, let's just stay home. So I think you can usually, though, that's something where you can often compromise and, kind of split the difference, so to speak. And sometimes we'll go out and then sometimes we'll stay home and you can recharge. And I think other types of personalities might be a little bit harder to accommodate, like if maybe somebody is very conscientious and maybe someone is not so, then maybe value judgments might come in more. And so I think it would just, depend on that. So if we're talking about personality conflicts,
So what are the main sources that you see about job conflicts?
So when you're looking at the workplace, it's obviously it's a different environment where the emotional context is different than the family, home, or even in the church. But oftentimes there can be conflicts through abuse of power. There's a dynamic where obviously people are either taking advantage of one and another and are not respecting each other. In the work environment, also these days there's more talk about there's competition versus collaboration. And these are different ways of dealing with maybe achieving goals. And some may feel that keeping a very competitive, aggressive workplace is the best way to accomplish the best ideas. And others believe that a more collaborative teamwork, working together is the way to accomplish the best outcome. But in the workplace, there's lots of tools that can be used in terms of developing trust and building on the relationships that are going to help both collaborative or the techniques that you're using in your workplace bring about success. And a lot of very intellectual groups such as Harvard Business Reviews or Forbes have put out lots of published materials that help workplace develop the culture and the systems that will work best for them to achieve their success.
Mhm.
And I have just one more question before the break. What is conflict resolution? We have been talking about conflicts, and we want to learn how to overcome them. So, what is conflict resolution?
I'll take that. Conflict resolution is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement. The disagreement may be personal, financial, political, or emotional. And when a dispute arises, often the best course of action is negotiation to resolve the disagreement. Often an impartial outsider, like a mediator, facilitator, or therapist, can help resolve those conflicts.
You know, what we're looking at really is quite complicated and intricate discussion, and we're just looking at it, very quickly. But thank you for letting us know exactly what conflict resolution is. We're going to just take a break right now so this can all sink in, and we're going to listen to "There's None Like You" by Monk.
And there is none like you. No one else can touch my heart like you do. And I could search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. Oh, there is none like you. No one else can touch my heart like you do. And I could search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. Your mercy flows like a river so wide. Healing comes from your hand. Suffering children are safe in your arms. And there is none like you. Oh, there is none like you. There is none like you. There's just no one else can touch my heart like you do. Oh, and I could search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. Oh, I could search for all eternity long and find that there is none. No, there is none. There is none like you. No, there is none like you. There's no one else, Lord. There's no one else, God, who can touch my heart, who can touch my heart. There is none like you.
Welcome back, everyone. We're on with Nina and Patrick Henry, who are dealing with a difficult subject, conflict resolution, which is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement among them. So, Nina, what are some effects of conflict?
Oh, well, I can talk about some of the negative effects of conflict. And of course, we have the obvious ones like war, murder, fighting, emotional trauma, anger, resentment. There's, of course, the maybe less obvious ones of feeling invalidated, frustration, and then often it can result in some sort of separation. If it doesn't result in some sort of violent act, often conflict can just end up with just the parties separating,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Some of the positives that can come out of conflict, and believe it or not, there's often some really good positives that can come out where people have the opportunity to consider other ideas and even alternatives that they may not have thought about before. And so by going through a process of discussing and hearing and sharing the different viewpoints in a conflict can often bring you to a broader understanding. Often when the conflict is resolved and there's a commitment at the end, it can be a stronger commitment because parties have come to this together, and brings more determination, more clarity in the goal and the vision, and again, be a very positive outcome for all parties. Obviously, with the clarification, sometimes it even brings a reassessment to what the objectives have been and the goals were, so that the parties again can even expand on what they might have thought was a small goal can turn out to be much more. Also, oftentimes when things resolve, and by going through the process, you can come closer together. You can often get more cohesiveness, more teamwork, and a personal and a family setting can even feel closer together by going through the process of hearing the other and then bringing a resolution that is good for all parties involved.
Okay, so understanding bring growth
And change.
yes, and more love.
Yes.
Yes. So there are some famous strategies that we can learn, academic learning about conflict strategies. Would you like to tell us about strategy 1? I think they named 5. Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman have some strategies, 5 strategies for resolving conflict. Nina, could you tell us about the first strategy?
That would be avoiding, and I'm very familiar with that one. That's my strategy of choice. And avoiding is when people ignore or withdraw from the conflict, and they choose this method when the discomfort of confrontation exceeds the potential rewards, of the conflict. They may also exhibit this type of behavior out of habit, of culture, or how they have become neurologically wired just due to all their various experiences in life. And this might seem easy, especially for the facilitator or even the person that they're in the conflict with. But because of that, because of their avoiding, they are not really contributing things of value to the conversation, and they may be withholding valuable ideas, thoughts, emotions. And when conflict is avoided, then resolution is more difficult. And like Patrick was saying, you do have to sometimes go through the conflict to get to the other side and to enjoy maybe more peace or more closeness or something of that nature.
Okay. So you need dialogue and for resolving conflict. But it is definitely one of the major choices that we have as human beings, to just ignore or avoid. Now, Patrick, could you tell us about the second strategy?
So competing is a strategy, it has more benefit in some realm than others. So, maybe in sport or even a workplace, competing can bring about a positive result because you compete for the best ideas. You might compete for the strongest plan or program that allows that organization to meet its best interest. Sometimes between people or small groups, competing isn't the best way because it generally infers a winner and a loser.
Right.
And that is not necessarily the outcome or the best outcome you might want in that situation. But in certain environments in the workplace, definitely in sport, we enjoy competition. We like to see in the Olympics the best performer be awarded the winning. That doesn't mean that other competitors aren't good, but it thrives and brings out the best in some situations.
But then in relationships, competition can be quite devastating.
That can be very negative. Yeah.
So what about our third strategy now, Nina? Accommodating.
Accommodating, yes. Accommodating is another familiar strategy. It's a strategy where one person gives in to the wishes or demands of another, and they're being cooperative but not assertive. And this may appear to be gracious. It may appear to be a gracious way to give in when one figures out that, they may have been in the wrong or they've held the wrong position. But it's less helpful when one party accommodates another merely to avoid confrontation. Like avoidance, it can result in groups where the most assertive people are or parties are commandeer the process, take control, are dominant in the conversations. And this can lead to a lack of depth or growth or insight in negotiations or directions that a group may take. And so it doesn't always mean that the best ideas kind of win out, because there is a strident voice that's over the whole process.
Okay.
So I know time is going quickly, but I'd like for you, Patrick, to just give us some insights when it comes to collaborating.
Yeah, so collaboration in an organization setting or in a family setting can be a really good way of bringing about either a solution or even a better solution. Collaboration often involves the best ideas coming together. It involves empathy, often trying to understand what is happening on the other point with the other points of view, and then essentially taking the best of those viewpoints to bring a solution for the entire group or the family. So collaboration is actually much more sought after in the work environment these days than competition. Competition seems to be a way of the past, and you reward the strongest and you punish the weak. In the work environment, and with so many people working in a different way than in the past, i.e. remotely, collaboration is now becoming a key of how to bring many the workflows and processes together through collaboration as we work from home or we work remotely. So I think empathy is a big part of learning to collaborate, because you have to give way to other ideas, not just your own.
And collaboration is really necessary with the family too, isn't it? Especially in today's world when we are all at home trying to work, Yeah.
So that brings us to the next point, Nina, and I hit it once again, compromising.
There you go. Compromising is generally where participants are partially assertive and cooperative. The concept is that everybody gives up a little bit of something, and everybody gets a little of something that they want, but nobody gets everything that they want. And the perception of the best outcome when working by compromise is that in which we split the difference. Compromise is perceived as being fair, even if nobody is particularly happy about the final outcome. So everyone's kind of miserable at the end.
Mhm.
Although compromise is often a sound way, it can be a sound way to resolve a conflict. If it's adhered to too rigidly, it can lead to really poor outcomes. So an example would be if you want to dress the baby one way and your spouse wants to dress the baby in another way, and one chooses one color pair of shoes and the other chooses a different, the baby walks out. Well, it doesn't walk out, it's carried out of the house with two different colors of shoes on its feet, because you split the difference. Like, you get one color, I get the other, and we're done. So it can be, it could possibly lead to silly outcomes, or even the example of Solomon, where there were the two women that were conflicting over the baby. Well, let me divide the baby in half. Well, what they would both end up with would be the same, which would be a dead baby, but that would not be a good outcome.
Okay. So how does God admonishes us to deal with difficult situations? We see how the world have strategies. We went through the 5 of them. But how does the Bible, God in the Bible admonishes us to deal with difficult situations?
Yeah, so I'll just add a few points here, and Nina may have some others. The Bible is just full with advice of how to deal with conflict and how to deal with our fellow man. So if you take a simple look in the New Testament, Matthew 5 at the Beatitudes, it's blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. In Matthew, it talks about whatsoever you wish for yourself, do for what others to do for you, you would do for others. There's just many scenarios where it tells us how to help resolve conflict. And it's really getting at what I continue to see as a core element, which is empathy. If you can listen to someone else's points of views and understand their emotional connection, you have a much better chance of bringing about a solution. And when you look at what the Bible is telling us at this, with empathy comes forgiveness. You really have to be able to look at someone who may have a different point of view or a conflicting idea, and it might even have hurt you. And if you can bring yourself to the point of forgiveness, then you can often move forward in that relationship. Anything else to add to how God instructs us?
Not really.
No? Okay.
But I think I agree with you, obviously, that we are being admonished to put others before ourselves. And if we do that, conflicts can often kind of wither away.
But how did Jesus resolve his conflicts, Nina?
Well, throughout the gospel, Jesus defined himself by saying who he was and what his mission was. So he was not afraid to be assertive in his dealings with, especially like the Pharisees. But at the same time, he was also very, very gentle with his disciples and his followers. He never controlled or manipulated anyone to agree. Instead, he asked questions. He invited others into the conversation to help them see, to help them come to their own realization, how they stood in relationship to him and to God. And freedom of choice was also always paramount for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So how does Matthew 18 fit into this?
Matthew 18, especially like, for instance, 18:15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. So generally, all of Matthew 18 is talking about how to treat your fellow man. And to reiterate what Patrick says, there's a lot of talk of empathy and putting others before yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a lot of questions in the chat. I don't know if we remember to remind the audience that they can put questions in the chat. But here we have a comment where Sister Solomon is saying, it's so true what Patrick said about abuse of power can take place and can cause much conflict, even in organization where we share the same core values as employees. So that's really very valid. If anyone has a question, they can put it in the chat. At this time, we're going to have our final selection, after which we're going to come back and ask the couple to give us their last tips that they have about conflict resolution, what they want us to take away from it.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burden be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Restless heart beats so imperfectly, but when you come and I am filled with wonder, sometimes I think I glimpse eternity. You raise me up. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Welcome back to our Youth Converse program,
Our
Couples Converse program, where we have our brother and sister Henry with us, who have given us some really good strategies of dealing and overcoming conflicts. At this time, we have no questions in the yes. When do you decide that a conflict can't be resolved and separation is necessary? When do you decide that a conflict can't be resolved and separation is necessary? I don't know if they mean space separation, you know, in the conflict, or you just walk away from the conflict, but it's in that context we'll look at it. You know?
That's a very complicated question. In some situations, you may be contracted and you cannot walk away, as simple as that. Certainly in a family or a marriage, it has lots of consequences for not resolving a conflict. So that's a very complicated personal and individual matter. There's also going to be situations where there is, in fact, physical life is threatened, and you may have to leave it from that perspective just to preserve life. So that's so broad. It's a hard question to answer.
To preserve life or your health, if the abuse is so bad, even if it's a job, the abuse is so bad that your mental health is suffering to the point where your physical health is, breaking down. So I think it would, as Patrick said, it would really depend on, you would need a little bit more details, I guess.
Yes, you would.
That's a very deep question. However, there are some cases where we sometimes agree to disagree in it rather than progress the conflict over years and years. And we just agree that we're not going to agree on this one.
But then we look at individual safety, and needs to be taken into consideration. Emotional well-being, psychological well-being, these things need to be taken into consideration. But that question is something that we probably could spend a whole hour just dealing with.
That's right. That's right. It's a loaded question. But we have one last question before we close, or one last thing that we would like you to do for us, and that is to tell us what nuggets would you want us to leave with or not to forget, in terms of conflict resolution or overcoming conflict.
Well, the ultimate goal of any conflict or confrontation is a complete resolution of the problem. So directness and honesty demonstrated in an atmosphere, especially if you're Christian, of prayer and humility should end all disagreements. And Christians can resolve conflict in marriage through listening and pursuing their spouse, considering the facts, evaluating, praying through the situation at hand, rejecting pride and selfish behavior, focusing on the problem, not the person, remembering that you cannot change your spouse, waiting, it could be for your spouse or waiting for God's answers, and compromise.
We can't change our spouse.
And you have to add for us, Patrick, before you go.
So certainly in the workplace or other environments, maybe even in the community, you often have to define the problem. If something is there that's bothering you, make sure you can define the problem and understand if you're the only one that's seeing this problem or having this conflict. It does mean that you need to obviously use your communication skills and bring people together that might be involved. Establish relationships with key people within your organization that can help you bring these actions about. And then, of course, there needs to be an action plan. So just depending on your role in the organization, you may not have the leadership or the authority, but you certainly have the ability to bring or communicate information so that those that do can develop an action plan, gain the commitment. And always important thing in resolution solving is having feedback. So feedback is hearing what works, what doesn't work, so that you can continue to improve and reach your goals.
Thank you. Sister Marjorie said, thank you, Patrick and Nina, for addressing the subject on conflict resolution. You've done very well, and you've answered all your questions. But with this in mind, we realize there are 4 steps that you've actually talked about. And when it comes to conflict and care in general, communication is key, isn't it? But then it's not just any kind, it's effective open communication. And then listening. Active listening means to ask the right questions to make sure we really understand what the individual is saying. Then we review our options. Either we shoot them or we listen to them. And then we end with a win-win solution. What is best for you and your parties that you're dealing with.
And remember, the Bible always has some scenarios, some example that we can lean on, and the word always gives us something that we can dwell
So
on
true.
in difficult situations. So thank you so very much for sharing your personal life stories with your conflict with us. Thank you, Pastor Rogers, for being on with us as a host today. And we're going to close with prayer, asking God to bless those who are on the line who need to learn about resolving conflict.
And I'd like to say something just before we pray. If you need for Nina and Patrick to come into your house to work with you in your conflict resolution, I will take a slight 10% of the,
We're not professionals, so we actually can't provide services. There are professionals that do this.
the
So
information that you share.
Maybe we need some of that professional service ourselves.
Valuable information.
Valuable information. We take it for granted, that all these things work and, that you've got a successful marriage, but there's so many dynamics to relationship with human beings, so many interpersonal, Let's bow our heads as we pray. Lord, we thank you for what has taken place here today and for the information that's been shared. Individuals who have listened on this afternoon, we pray you would help them to use these little bits of information to help with situations which could get out of hand. We realize it's not only in marriage that we have conflict, but we can have conflict on a job, even between friends. And so, Father, give us wisdom to hear that still small voice that says, this is the way, walk in it, or this is the right thing to do it. And so, Lord, thank you for brother and sister Henry, who have shared this information with us. And as a result, may somebody's life go in a different direction that is positive and strong. So hear our prayer we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you for staying with us today. We are running a little late, but it was important information.
Wow.
And we thank you for your patience. Bye-bye.
thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.